Welcome back to the Addiction Mindset Workbook and PDF series. In this activity, we're on activity number 11 regarding relapse and triggers. Now, for many people, when it comes to substance abuse disorders or addiction, especially nicotine, people often experience relapse. This is when you use the substance again. Now, hopefully, being part of the Addiction Mindset family, this doesn't happen to you. Maybe this isn't your first time quitting. I'm going to venture to guess for a majority of you it is not. And I'm going to guess that you've experienced relapse before. Relapse is a horrible feeling. We talked about this a little bit earlier when we talked about accountability. When you tell yourself you're going to do something and then you don't see that something through, you don't follow through on it, it tends to make us feel really, really crappy inside. So for that reason, relapse often becomes a very defeated, draining, exhausting, and depressing feeling. I want to remind you it doesn't have to be. At any given moment, at any time during the day, you truly have the opportunity to start your day over. Go home, take a shower, change your clothes, call a friend. Start your day over as often as you need to. I want to say a few things about relapse before I begin. In the previous section, we talked about withdrawal. And one of the things that I mentioned was when I experienced symptoms of withdrawal, I viewed those as signs of progress. Every time I felt that headache, or every time I felt that fatigue, or every time that craving started to speak to me, I would assure myself that these were signs and symptoms that addiction was leaving my body. Withdrawal was quite literally me defeating addiction. I looked at withdrawal differently. Instead of viewing it as a negative experience, I viewed it as an extremely positive thing in my life. The withdrawal was the addiction leaving my body. It was the nicotine leaving my body. I was winning. Withdrawal was me winning. Now, that's not to say that I enjoyed it. Although I viewed it as a positive experience, does not mean that I enjoyed withdrawal. When you go through withdrawal, I want you to remind yourself of how uncomfortable it made you, the amount of time that you wasted going through it, and the amount of energy that it took from you. Remind yourself that withdrawal is something that you never want to experience again from nicotine. So if you're considering relapsing or going back to your old habits, ask yourself, do I really want to go through that again? In this activity, what I want you to do is identify some triggers or some things that can often lead to relapse. Now, if it's friends, if it's family, if it's driving in a car, if it's eating food like after a big meal, I don't want you to stop eating food. I don't want you to stop talking to your friends. And I certainly don't want you to stop driving around in your car. You need that in order to go to work and make money to support yourself. But I do want you to be on guard for these situations, and I want you to come up with a plan of how you will handle these situations when they present themselves. So, let's jump into it. Common reasons for relapse for me, or triggers, included peer pressure from friends, which we talked about earlier, and we're going to talk about more in activity number 12. Alcohol. Alcohol was always a common reason for relapse. It decreases prefrontal cortex function and decision making. Anytime I drank, I always relapsed on nicotine. Therefore, in order to quit nicotine, I had to quit drinking. Isolation. Being alone often led to relapse for me. I'm a social individual. Boredom. Being bored. I don't allow myself to get bored anymore, and hopefully you don't either. Hopefully you filled out those activity sheets that I provided for you on setting up your goals. Potentially the most important part of this whole program. Friends, kind of the same thing as peer pressure. Family, sometimes my family stresses me out. I used to use that stress as an excuse to use nicotine. Of course, that turned out to be one of those lies that addiction was telling me. My family was making me upset. I'm upset and stressed. Nicotine can help solve the solution. Absolutely not. Sleep deprivation decreases willpower. I should have talked about this in the other video prior. When you don't get a good night's sleep, willpower has been proven to decrease. Now, I don't want you to use willpower to quit, and we're going to discuss that in more detail when we talk about building willpower. But I do want you to feel good each day. Getting a sound night's sleep is essential for having willpower. If you drink alcohol and you stay up eating crappy food all night, you're going to feel like crap when you wake up the next day. Addiction loves it when you don't feel good about yourself. Don't give it the opportunity. Cravings, common reason for relapse, a long car ride, after sex, and after a big meal. Now the reality is, does having nicotine make sex any better? Does having nicotine enhance the flavor of that meal? Absolutely not. It actually damages your taste buds over time and your sense of smell. I don't know about you, but I truly believed that nicotine made a big meal better, made sex more enjoyable, and made long car rides a little less long. I bet just talking about this is making some of you think about, oh, I love nicotine after a long car ride, or I love nicotine after a large meal. You have to see nicotine for what it is. It is a drug addiction, and it's robbing the joy of those other activities from you every second that you're addicted. You should enjoy a big meal regardless of nicotine intake. The fact that you eat a big meal and then feel it's tarnished by not having nicotine afterwards is a true sign of addiction and could potentially be leading to a lot of unhappiness in your life. Think about the high school athlete that wins the football game but isn't excited until they get to the locker room and get to consume nicotine or THC. That win was exciting. That win should be motivating. That win should make you want to work harder to continue winning in the future. Nicotine robs that of us. Identify some of your triggers and then think of ways in which you can manage these situations when they present themselves. Is that by simply not drinking anymore? Is it by calling a friend when you're taking a long car ride? Is it by meditating or exercising if you find yourself stressed? What ways can you manage these triggers so you can still enjoy your life without having to get rid of everything that you enjoyed? Because I'll tell you, everything was a trigger for me for nicotine. Sunny weather, bad weather, driving in a car, celebrating a good test grade, failing a test, everything was an excuse to use nicotine. Once I accepted that it was nothing more than a drug addiction, those triggers suddenly weren't triggers anymore. In the next video, we'll be on activity number 12, peer pressure. I can't wait to see you there. Follow along.